Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Please settle down and dig into your very nice lunch. I'm very happy to speak while you're eating, so please continue eating. Mr. Chang here wants to keep us on schedule, so we will try our best. First of all, I'd like to also extend my personal, very warm welcome to all of you. This is a very heartwarming occasion for me. This is the third time we now have this conference, and I must say, I am completely amazed at the quality of the participation, and frankly, I have to say personally, I got a lot out of the speeches, and especially our keynotes yesterday and this morning. I think many of you have the same feeling, and I hope that this conference could be the beginning of a lot of ideas and thought starters in the whole idea of how we think about universal health and the whole idea of inclusive growth and the new multilateral systems that we may need in the world today. So in fact, I'd like to start by saying that in September 2015, all the 193 countries in the world adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And as many speakers have referred to, goal number 3 is to achieve healthy lives and well-being for all ages. Healthy lives and well-being for all ages. This simple factual statement, in my mind, contains 3 remarkable points. First, that all the countries in the world came together, all the countries, and actually concluded an agreement. Second, that the agreement was to take action for the benefit of all peoples, leaving no one behind. The whole concept of inclusive growth, leaving no one behind. And then finally, that everyone has the right to access affordable health care for good health and well-being. So this means people of all ages, from young to old. And as we all know, one of the biggest challenges that we have today is the whole idea of healthy aging in the world. And to me, that is a new frontier for all of us. Let me look at these things in a little more detail. The 2030 Agenda is a demonstration of the value of global cooperation and an endorsement of the rule-based multilateral system and institutions. Without the United Nations, we would not have this agenda, and the world would be poorer and less stable. The United Nations is the member of the constellation of the multilateral institutions that came into being after the Second World War. It's been 70 years now, and it is complemented by such other institutions as the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the World Trade Organization, the World Health Organization, just to name a few. These institutions were established to provide a global framework for peace and prosperity and to prevent the kind of destructive war that took place in the first half of the 20th century. And we should all be very thankful that we have now lived for 70 years, frankly, my whole lifetime, in a world of peace. And I think let's not forget that and what the institutions have done. The outcome under this multilateral framework has been impressive. From its inception, economic growth has been the norm. Martin Wolf of the Financial Times pointed out that since the 1950s, the global economy has grown every year, and that with very few exceptions, always at a 2% rate or higher. This growth is not due to any particular policy issue, but is broadly shaped by the 3 forces of peace, globalization, and technology. Peace among the major powers allows for continued surge of economic activity in most of the world. The growth of once poor countries outside the West remains the largest force today, powering the world economy forward. As is well documented, globalization has lifted hundreds of millions, in fact, I should say billions, of people out of poverty, especially in Asia. Globalization and ongoing technological revolution have allowed growth to persist without the one economic factor that has almost stopped it in the past, and that is inflation. It is hard for prices to rise overall in the world when goods and services can be supplied much more economically by a person somewhere in other part of the world through automation, etc. The absence of inflation over the past 25 years is still the remarkable trend that keeps the global economic growth engine chugging along. But the forces producing these benign circumstances all seem to have come increasingly under pressure, as we all know today. Attacks on globalization have intensified. Right-wing nationalism is rising, as well as protectionism. While the possibility of trade wars loom large, I'm not so sure that statement isn't dated already. The trade war is already here. Yeah. Institutions that underpin the rule-based multilateral system are under challenge from actually some government members, as we all know. While these shifts in sentiments understandably cause concern, I see no reason for despondency. The world is still at peace. Globalization is still going strong and operating in really, can I say, internet time. Technology is still propelling growth and enhancing the quality of lives. Importantly, these shifts could provide us with both the opportunity and the incentive to update the global framework and institutions that were established some 7 decades ago. Indeed, I believe that this is an incredible opportunity for the world to seriously consider a new global framework designed to fit the purpose of today's fast-moving and highly connected internet global economy that many of the speakers have referred to. Just imagine that this time round, each of us could be contributing to the creation of a new global institution, not merely inheriting them from previous generations. What designs should we include in this new global model in order to humanize globalization and to make it truly inclusive? Let me leave that thought with you, and I'll perhaps share some of my thoughts at the end with you on this very issue. What designs should we include in the new global model in order to humanize globalization and to make it truly inclusive? Goal number 3, the SDG, mentions specifically that it is to promote healthy lives and well-being for all ages. This is an ambitious goal as the world's population are aging, and healthcare costs rise with age. On the average, the healthcare cost of an 80-year-old is 5 times greater than that of a 30-year-old. By 2050, 2 billion of the world's 9.7 billion people is expected to be over the age of 60. The reference to all ages reflects the mandate for inclusiveness, as well as the consensus that health is a fundamental human right. Poor health threatens the rights of children to education, limits economic opportunities for men and women, deprives the elderly of dignity, and increases poverty. In addition to being a cause of poverty, health is impacted by poverty and strongly connected to other aspects of sustainable development, including water and sanitation, gender equality, climate change, and indeed, eventually to peace and stability. Achieving this goal will require universal health coverage so that all people could access the full range of health services they need without exposing them to really financial hardships. The concept of universal health coverage was first realized in 1946 with the establishment of the National Health Service in the UK. This was designed to cover the entire population in the UK with virtually free health services and to finance the cost primarily by general taxes. Since then, many countries around the world have implemented universal health coverage that is either wholly or partly paid by government. With the rise of non-communicable diseases, aging populations, and outbreaks of old and new diseases and other health emergencies, the need for universal health coverage in all countries have never been greater. There is also consensus that access to affordable healthcare has the power not only to improve the overall health of people, but also the development and economic prosperity of entire nations. Universal healthcare is an emotive issue. It figures prominently in the UK referendum when voters were greatly influenced by the Brexiters' misleading campaign that claimed that leaving the EU would release an additional £350 million a week for the national health services. I'm afraid nobody talks about that anymore. It is a divisive issue in the US between the progressive who want it and the conservatives who oppose it because they see it as fundamentally and antithetical to the concept of a free society. In any event, coverage for everyone is still a distant dream. Right now, only about half the world's population is covered, leaving hundreds of millions, actually I have to say billions, without access even to basic healthcare services. Money is scarce, and governments do not have the resources to provide the needed services indefinitely into the future. So, what does one do? To provide universal health coverage on a sustainable basis, we have to design a new paradigm that is based on a completely new mindset, based on technologies, based on financing and delivery approaches that have not been tried and tested before. We have heard some creative ideas at this summit. George Papandreou, our keynote speaker yesterday, outlined some interesting initiatives that could help to check the rising healthcare costs and improve access to healthcare globally. I would like to mention also digital health. This is also one area that our joint venture partner Jerry Liao has so well really positioned, digital health. We are perhaps most familiar with the mobile health apps that support and monitor healthy behavior in the West. Those of us who use wearable devices can now instantly check heart conditions using the FDA-approved electrocardiogram on the Apple Watch Series 4. Actually, I use a Huawei, but that also works very well. Telemedicine, where consultations take place via video link, has made tremendous impact in many emerging countries where there is a shortage of healthcare personnel and poor transport infrastructure. And today, we heard an amazing story of WeDoctor, our joint venture partner in China, that really revolutionized the delivery of health services to the rural areas by the use of AI, by the use of big data, by the use of internet. And I think that is truly inspirational. Digital health encompasses also many distinct technologies. It covers, for example, decisional support systems that use algorithms derived through mining clinical data sets. In also connected biometric sensors, such as continuous glucose monitoring, and electronic personal health records, of course, is very much part of the whole system. And we can expect increasingly sophisticated applications. In short, digital health is revolutionary and has the power to provide better services at lower costs. According to McKinsey, digital health has the potential to cut healthcare costs by an estimated $7 billion a year in the United States alone. So think of the potential really beyond that to the rest of the world. In this new paradigm, we definitely need the engagement of the whole business sector. Not only those enterprises directly involved in the healthcare industry, but also it is no longer sufficient for any business to concern itself only with those issues that directly affect the firm, such as risk management or contingency planning, should there be an outbreak of pandemics and so on. We all do that already. What I would like to see is that businesses has to engage both direct and indirect employees in their entire supply chain. And that really broadens the perspective. You know, just to give you an idea, at VictorFung, we actually deal with about 15,000 suppliers from factories in 50 countries in the world. And we deal with customers in over 8,000 retailers in about 30 countries in the world. So if you put all that together and look at the people that we touch through logistics and so on, our supply chain, without exaggeration, could touch the lives of 1 billion people. And so really, the CEO of Li & Fung, Spencer Fung, has made our vision to be creating the digitalized supply chain of the future, okay, to help our customers, but at the same time, make a difference in the lives of 1 billion people that is a part of our global supply chain. So I think that to me is perhaps an example of how, if you think through where your reach is in all our businesses, how many people that we can affect, who are actually, I would say, indirect employees and their families, and not our direct employees. So I think, ladies and gentlemen, I think if this is the direction that we're going into, I'd like to conclude my remarks, very short remarks this morning, so we can have a chance to do a lot of interaction together by actually putting before you an idea. After hearing the very inspirational speeches of our keynote speakers yesterday, George Papandreou and Peter Piot, and also today from Chairman Han and Jerry Liao, I think I'm really very taken by the various inspiring aspects of their visionary thinking. So I'm especially impressed by the idea that we need a new multilateral system built on a new social contract, and that the place to start is perhaps with a basis which touches the people, which is universal health care. So really, from the concept of sharing on the universal health care to move towards building a new global social contract, and eventually to a relook at our multilateral institutions and our multilateral systems that will be fit for purpose for today and the future. And that's an idea that George has really impressed onto me in the recent period. Now, this, in my mind, I think will begin to address the most important and fundamental aspects of inequality. And as I said earlier in my speech, access to affordable health care is perhaps one of the most basic human rights. And in fact, if everybody agrees that our biggest problem in the world today is inequality, that is perhaps the most pragmatic way that we can tackle that issue from the ground up. Also, I think I'm also inspired very much by the success story of WeDoctor, a joint venture partner in China, and the whole idea of digital health, internet health. Jerry has revolutionized the delivery of healthcare to the grassroots at the rural level via the use of artificial intelligence and the use of the internet, and how we can actually extend beyond China and to other parts of the world. It's really a way, in my mind, for the developing economies with its massive challenges to actually use technology and new innovation to leapfrog the whole idea and really bring the population to a new level in terms of universal health care. So, ladies and gentlemen, in my mind, all this translates into perhaps an initiative that we can think about for the Belt and Road. For those of you who are not familiar with the One Belt, One Road or the Belt and Road Initiative, it is really a concept that is very simple. It really is a revival of an ancient idea of the Silk Road, which was thousands of years ago. So we simply ask the question, why don't we reconnect Asia with Europe and via that Silk Road? And then, of course, we're going to modernize it by thinking about a second Silk Road, which is called the Maritime Silk Road, which starts from the coast of China through Southeast Asia, through South Asia, Africa, and then Middle East to Europe. So there's two Silk Roads, the Belt and the Road. One is overland, and the second is the Maritime Silk Road. The important thing about this whole concept of the Belt and Road Initiative, it actually links 2/3 of the world's population in a total of about 65 countries It also accounts for 1/3 of the GDP of the world and about 1/3 of the consumption. So take that idea. 65 countries, many of them are developing, in fact, all of them, you could say, are developing economies until you get to the European side. And the idea of 2/3 of the world population with 1/3 of the world's GDP and 1/3 of the world's consumption already tell you this is in the lower economic rung of the global population. And if there's a way to actually, after the infrastructure is built out, to connect this into a system, a platform, over which we can actually flow a lot of ideas. And the first one that could flow is this idea of universal healthcare. Maybe we can use healthcare as the fundamental building block and to really attain the SDGs goal number 3. And then build really people-to-people connection and begin at the inclusive growth level to really equalize some of the blatant inequalities that we see in the world today. And then eventually, this will lead to this new global social contract. And of course, the end result, I think, is what I've always thought about, is the need to update our multilateral institutions. They have served us so well in the last 70 years. And I'm the first to admit, though, that they need to be updated so that they can fit today's world. And the solution is not to throw them away, which some people have attempted to do, is to really update and improve them. And we cannot just build at the institutional level without actually having the foundation, the building blocks. And this idea of universal healthcare, you know, I'm just looking at Dr. Somsak there, you know, like what you practice and implemented so well in Thailand, for example, in the examples that we see being revolutionized in China at the rural level, gives me hope that we can actually use this. And the mechanism maybe is this Silk Belt and Road idea. And this initiative can be now started at the basic healthcare, universal healthcare level to then build as a building block for the future of the world's multilateral system. So to accomplish this idea, this vision, you know, this really just came up this morning. You know, I think maybe we can consider the following idea. Maybe one way to address this is to consider the idea of forming a new Belt and Road, One Belt, One Road University Healthcare Alliance. Something that we can all actually make healthcare available to more and more people along the 65 countries of the Belt and Road, two-thirds of the world's population. And then it could be a platform for people with diverse interests, governments, NGOs, you know, the healthcare profession, absolutely, the technology, et cetera, to actually come together to actually develop this new universal healthcare aspect for the people that really is in very dire need. So this idea of thinking about this alliance, this One Belt, One Road Universal Healthcare Alliance as a platform for the future is something that I would like to put in front of you. It is a way for us to really benefit in the healthcare area by the use of things like the new technology and other forms of innovation. And really, I think it is a very important first move towards satisfying the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN, especially goal number 3. So I think it is also an area in which, you know, both the majority, of course, is developing economies, but also more advanced economies, definitely from Europe, from Asia, and of course, from United States and other part of the world can also participate in this initiative. And eventually, perhaps from there, one could go global. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for the time, and maybe we can have some exchange. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fung. Sir, may we please invite you to take a seat, and may we please invite Lakshmi back as well. An invitation to continue enjoying your lunch, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
As we have the Q&A. engagement. Open to the floor as well for those of you who need to also
Thank you.
have your questions to be answered. Please get our attention. Lakshmi, over to you.
So that was quite a heavy lunch idea, like, not something to be thrown away lightly. Continuing what you left off with, which is the Universal Healthcare Alliance along the Belt and Road, one of the things that defines really all these 65 countries is our heterogeneity. We are not all the same. We are not bound by the same language. Even within a country, we have very large differences, and that's our strength, actually. So in what way do you think we can bring uniformity, not uniformity, sort of unification of these diverse while we keep the singular voice?
Isn't the binding force the need for universal health care?
Yeah.
And the need for the amelioration of human suffering and the need to eliminate some of the very serious inequalities that we see today.
Yeah.
I think that is something that's good in any language, in any culture.
Yeah.
And I think if we can actually use that as our common language, I think people would be very happy to subscribe. You know, my sense is this, that, you know, we've looked at in many sort of sectors in the business world, how the use of technology have actually made a leapfrog and forced the transformation of whole industries and whole sectors and whole countries. Now, why can't we think of adopting some of the innovation and the technologies to transform, you know, our need for healthcare, universal healthcare? And like what Jerry was saying, you know, maybe Alibaba brought the shopping mall into the home. Maybe this idea of using technology is bringing the healthcare in the hospital to the healthcare in the home. And then the whole idea of actually moving it to the rural level was really, I think, a very, very astounding concept.
And also, I think instead of one company having multiple branches, the way to think about it as many companies coming together,
Totally.
like each country, each province, it has its own voice, and all
Totally.
of them coming together.
Totally.
It's more like a United Nations as opposed to, one company with many
I would go
branches.
further, actually.
Yeah.
I would say there's a room for participation in large number of small and medium-sized enterprises.
Yes, absolutely.
I think that is also the key. You know, if we can have the proper platform and the framework, institutional framework, we can actually encourage the participation of small and medium-sized enterprises in every country.
Yes.
And to work at the rural level. You
And
know, it's the barefoot doctor idea, the modern barefoot doctor. you
Yeah.
know.
And also,
Yeah.
you bring an interesting thing of it's an important for, just like the public-private, this is about the foundation and the private enterprise to come together. I mean, we had Alfred Mann Foundation in some of the talks about
Yes.
how now the foundations have to step in to probably make the investments that are long-term. So because a venture capitalists say, how do I get my 30x in 5 years? Whereas a foundation may say, okay, I will invest in it for 10 years. So
We
is there,
may
do you
need
see
a-
that?
We may need a slightly newer class of entrepreneurs and capitalists.
Yeah. Newer form of
People who
capital
look-
for sure.
who looks a little longer term
Yes.
at not only the monetary returns, but the social impact investing of what their capital could do. I think the capital should be thought through as a catalyst.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, there's a need for return. I'm a businessman.
Yeah.
But I think there is a difference between short-term return and long-term return.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think the ability to trade the longer horizon, okay, to create systems that are more sustainable for the longer term, that you can actually get perhaps a lower returns, but over a longer period, I think is a reasonable trade-off.
Yeah.
And we need to get away from this short-termism you know, that I want my money doubled in 3 years. I mean,
Right.
that's a normal venture capital term.
Yeah.
I think we got to get away from that sort of mantra.
Maybe we should start an adventure capital, you know, not venture capital, something like that. And one of the other things is in the last session, the key conversation was to really leapfrog, we need to unlearn first. Because we are so embedded in doing things a certain way. What are some of the things you think we need to unlearn? One is we talked about the short-term gain kind of a thing. Just
Well, the other thing we need to unlearn is that we rely on government for everything.
yes,
You know, when there's a problem, well, go ask the government. Or whenever the problem is the government's fault.
Yeah.
I think the government has a very important role to play, don't get me wrong. But I think it's at least a bipartite relationship if it's not a tripartite relationship. I don't think we can point the finger. It's a common problem and we've got to work together. You can't say whenever there's a problem, it's a government problem.
yeah,
I think we got to really unlearn that. You know, we all fall into that trap.
yeah,
You know, and I would like to just make a call to my fellow, you know, business sector people. I think we need to have a broader concept of what the corporation should be doing.
yeah,
You know, yes, we need to create value for shareholders, without doubt. But that is not our only stakeholder.
Actually,
You know, it's got to be a much wider set of stakeholders.
Yeah.
Our employees, our customers, and indeed, society at large. I think we have to get that thinking into our overall. It's not just maximization of the share price for the stock shareholders.
And today I think there are many corporations that are larger than many economies. And I think George was mentioning yesterday about how literally less than 5% of the people control 80% of the wealth. I mean, we have entities larger than government who can participate in this to make something happen. I want to open it up for questions from the audience. If any of you have a question, please put your hand up and there is a mic that will come to you while I keep
I'd like to encourage participation
Yes.
from all of you because, you know, I think hopefully the conference could provide a little more opportunity for people to contribute your ideas. So you don't have to ask the question. Maybe you want to make a point.
Yes,
You know, maybe
absolutely. If
wanna-
you have a comment,
you know.
contribute to the conversation, and offer to say, hey, I got an idea, whatever it is. Please, if you don't put your
Mr.
hand
Paul
up,
Bradley, I'm looking at you. You always have an idea and a question.
if not, we'll start calling out. Table number 15 or something like that.
First of all, Victor, I'm really glad you're defending global institutions and free trade because in the age of disruption, if we're not fighting for this now and seeing how to evolve that model, then all of the things we take for granted are at risk. So I'm glad you brought that up, and I think we all have a shared commitment to that objective in spite of certain political back positioning. You're talking about the Silk Road and all the amazing companies that have been at this conference sharing your new innovation and technology, but you're also talking about digitizing the Silk Road. And a digitized Silk Road is a whole different part beyond the logistics and the trade. And I think you've touched on the biggest opportunity of that with the healthcare enabler like we saw with the China example. That can extend through that digitized platform, provide both the capitalist and a human value through the digitized Silk Road. And from that, it can really build momentum in a way that I think goes far beyond the logistics component. So could you maybe elaborate a bit more on how we could take the digitized Silk Road, starting with healthcare, plugging and playing some of these amazing companies and technology.
Sure.
And what else can we build on that? That's probably the best way to defend the institutions that we believe in.
You know, today I think we tend to think a lot about the digitalization as one thing, and then in a sense, the brick and mortar world, if I'm talking retailing, as another thing. Frankly, no such thing exists anymore. I think the whole thing is merging into an omni-channel world. What's called online to offline, O2O. I think we need to really think in those terms. So when you talk about physical infrastructure and physical logistics, I don't think you can separate it from digital infrastructure. It's one and the same. It's all part of infrastructure. So when we build out the infrastructure on the Silk Road, I would fully expect that the digital infrastructure will build along with it. So as that develops, I think it's going to be really a very, very easy step for us then to actually use that platform. In fact, there's too much, for those of you who are familiar with the Belt and Road Initiative, frankly, so far the focus has all been on building infrastructure.
Yeah.
No, I don't disagree with that, because before you have connectivity, both on the ground and in cyberspace, okay, before you have, it's hard to talk about flows, right? What do you put? But now that we are making some very good initial sort of forays into building that physical infrastructure and that digital infrastructure, I think we should start thinking about, okay, when that infrastructure is finished, which will be very short, it's going to be in 3 years to 5 years' time at the most. Okay, we're going to have that system in place. What is going to be flowing over it is goods, people. What I'm really proposing here is the flow of healthcare.
Yeah.
And systems and innovation and really capacity building, etc. Now, there may be some physical things, maybe pooling of technologies, pooling of big data, etc. And we can all kind of do some thinking about that.
One of the things we talked in the previous session is about at the end, the beginning of it all, there has to be purpose, right? Purpose is the most important thing. So one of the things is the Belt and Road is more seen as an infrastructure led by very few countries. But when you say Silk Road, it evokes a much more, like Yo-Yo Ma, and it's a much larger
It's romantic.
concept. Romantic. And also it's you relate to it, saying, yes, I'm part of it. So one of the things we do need to do is to, as you just said, how do you expand the concept of Belt and Road into an emotional journey of progress, as opposed to we need to make a road, we need to make a bridge, kind of a thing.
Sure. I think the answer must be human contact.
Yeah.
And cultural exchange.
Yes.
And in a sense, you may say universal healthcare is a form of cultural exchange, but it's a very specific form that people feel the need for. I'm obviously very happy to learn about cultures in Central Asia and so on, but those would be things that could be considered luxuries. Okay, I'm certainly very happy to have them, but in terms of exchange, human exchange of necessities,
Yes.
and I think that's healthcare.
Yeah.
I'm very impressed by what you said, George. It's a fundamental human right.
Yeah.
And it's really, it's the whole basis of inclusiveness.
Yes.
Really, if you start from that premise, there's absolutely very little doubt about where we'll be starting to work.
Any other comments? Otherwise, we'll start calling by table.
I used to be a professor. I used to make cold calls.
Yes.
So
Hi, my name is Dan Vedat, founder of MeadoPad. And I just want to echo the importance of healthcare from another perspective that usually people don't talk about it. We as a company, our vision is how can we create a world that people can live longer? And that is quite important because when you live longer, you can start doing great works, give back to the economy, and help basically your loved ones to be around you. This morning, Catherine talked about there is a correlation between wealth and health. The wealthier you are, the healthier you are. But there is the other correlations. The healthier you are, the longer you can live. You will become wealthier, and the economy of your country or a region becomes better. And it's very important to look at how we can together help people to live extra 5 years, extra 10 years, extra 20 years, because that enable us, again, as a human, as a society, to contribute back to the economy. And that's one of the things that we are very excited about what Jerry is doing, or ourselves when we partner with Tencent around predicting complications, because complications cause people to die early and not have that opportunity. It's something that I'm very proud of what everyone talked about, and it's something we should work closely together from the technology, from pharma, from medical, hospitals, groups, and also government.
Yeah. Alexander, I can't agree with you more, but I would just add one point. Living longer, obviously, is very important, very useful, but I think healthy aging is also even, I think you want to live longer healthily.
Yeah.
And then I would challenge all of you to think, if you do have an extra 10, 20 years, what are you going to do with it? Yeah. You don't want to be just another extra longer burden on society. I think you've got to think through, now the idea is that, you've made your contributions, and now you're living longer, you're in retirement. I mean, how long can you play golf for?
Yeah.
And so I think we really got to think about healthy longevity, definitely longevity, but healthy longevity, and what are the meaningful things you could do for yourself and contributing back to society during that longer, healthier life. I think that would be my thought.
Maybe Robert, you have something to add to this conversation, because you were talking about how we can find out about ourselves better to be healthy in a better way. Maybe, why don't you add something?
Can I see you after lunch, Robert?
Yeah.
I need to find out.
I think there's a very, very big piece of what he's done.
I know Robert very well.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I think as the point I made in my talk is that I believe that there are technologies today that would allow us to live healthier and longer.
Yeah.
And because they're not perfect, because they're not embracing all the complexity of all the omics layers, and because of cultural issues within our medical systems, we are not implementing them. So I do think there are things we can do today, but it takes, and I really, to jump on this theme, it takes unlearning some of the culture of our medical establishment. It takes unlearning some of the ways in which we reimburse for health care. And it takes a kind of optimistic embrace of the future, which is strangely absent among rank and file medical practitioners. Have you noticed that? There's a certain cynicism that leads to doing things the same way we've always done them that is very pervasive. So I think these are all things to consider as we try to look more aggressively toward the future.
Can I comment on that? I think that's an absolute crucial point. I think many speakers have talked about how we need to change from, sort of curing sick people to keeping people healthy.
Yes.
That is a very fundamental shift. I must say that my layman's perception of the healthcare profession today is how to cure sick people, right? That's what they've been taught. I mean, you can't blame them. And the idea of keeping people healthy is another concept.
Yeah.
Now, I would have to say that concept may not come from within the profession. It would come from the people, and frankly, it could come very much from the business sector.
Yeah.
Because there are huge opportunities. One of our best customers is a company called Under Armour. You guys may know from the US. And they make, we work with them on wearables and equipment and clothing that would allow you to measure your pulse or whatever it is, doing your exercise, when you're sleeping, how much are you walking. And that actually keeps you healthy. And I think it's actually almost coming from the people and the business. And then, in a sense, the profession may be, if I may be so bold as to say, forced to acknowledge this and change the focus from curing sick people to keeping people healthy. Maybe I should go to my doctor and say, I'm going to pay you so much every month for keeping me out of hospital. Not every time I come visit for you to, So it's sort of concepts like this that I think one has to start thinking about.
Actually, it's interesting. 2 days ago, one of my friends, no, 2 days ago, one of my friends told me he has a personal trainer, and he pays him X every month. But every time he loses 1 kg, he gives him 3 times that much. So it's sort of, he says, it's my guy, and is incentivized to keep me healthy, not the other way around. So just to summarize, there's a concept we are talking about, universal health care, not necessarily as a government system or so, but about a citizen system that we can put together, where potentially the for-profit, non-profit, and the academic institutions can come together and think of a solution where we embrace it with all our heterogeneity, with all our independent voices, where small and medium businesses can be part of it as well. Because the moment it's seen as belonging to one person, everybody else checks out. So how to keep it the democratic voice is
Lakshmi,
important.
I cannot agree with you more. Maybe the alliance I'm talking about is exactly that open forum.
Yeah.
Acropolis. Or, yeah, I'm learning, George. Anyway, it's that open forum in which diverse opinions from all these different sectors could come together and exchange. And that's a forum. And this alliance is a forum, with different sectors all participating. But I can tell you this is the forum that is very important for the future of the world. It's a forum that is very important for all of us in our lives. Because I don't know about you, I'm aging. I need help. And I think we need to come together and, sort of work on this. And in an open, participative basis. Yeah. And the common driver is let's go back and not forget the SDGs.
Yes. Yeah.
And the achievement of that. And it's all about inclusiveness and the alleviation of human suffering.
And I think just to wrap up, just as the SDGs seem to have transcended any one country and embraced as global, this idea also needs to transcend any one country or company and be embraced as something global. So hopefully we'll all say next year when we are back at this conference that, hey, we started a conversation last year and look where we are. And hopefully we'll have a lot to talk about next year. We come together where coming together is not just about sharing an idea and going away, but it's about coming together to continue the conversation in our own voice. So hopefully every year we'll have a progress report on this.
Ben, we're putting you on the spot. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lakshmi. Thank you, Dr. Fung.